I don't think that it was necessarily misgendering or using the wrong pronouns. I think Kehlani had a problem probably with tone, is what it seemed like to me. Let me take a moment here. Um, a huge part of the backlash is about pronouns, or the believed backlash is about pronouns, about whether or not Kehlani uses she, her pronouns or they, them pronouns. She said in multiple interviews at this point that she uses both of them. And that she's not really all that pressed about it. So I can identify with that. So moving forward, I will be using she, her pronouns, but I am very well aware of the fact that Kehlani also goes by they, them pronouns. And that she's not that pressed about it, so I don't think y'all have to be as pressed about it either. And I think that that leads into a bigger point about how in the future people need to approach those who have different pronouns than the standard she, her, or he, him pronouns. If you're going to be an interviewer, you're going to have to start to get used to dealing with things differently. It's just the reality of the situation. Now, as I mentioned multiple times, I'm a Kehlani, like I love Kehlani. She's not done anything in my mind yet. I've not seen anything that she's done yet that has put a poor taste in my mouth at all. Um, so I don't know where all this energy is coming from. I don't know. It just felt deeply disrespectful to me. But yeah, I think that this was an example of like anybody can get in front of a mic, right? Anyone. Anyone can get in front of a mic. You buy a mic. I got this mic off of bnh.com. And now I have a mic. And now I post things online. So, I mean, anybody could be in front of a mic, right? Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're great at interviewing. And anybody can ask questions, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at interviewing. I don't know if you guys can notice, but or if you can tell, but I'm like getting to the bottom of the With the sugar and the cocoa powder, I'm starting to run out. Scraping the bottom of the barrel now. Maintaining this set is something that I did not put quite enough thought into, but we gonna get there, y'all. Slowly but surely. Oh my God. That was my bad. I was moving too slow. All right. Testing, testing, testing. We good, we good. Hold on a second. Usually my neighbor is playing music downstairs, and so I have to turn the mic down. I think I can turn it up. I think it's safe to turn it up. I don't know. So I'm gonna turn it up just a tad. And hopefully my neighbor won't decide to start playing music in the middle of this. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So what's good, y'all? My name is Morgan Clement. I'm an artist and designer based in Los Angeles, California. I have a clothing line called Matin and Morgan. It's like dangerously close to releasing. And this is Good Morning Morgan. And today I am drinking my tried and true portrait coffee. Yeah. Let's see. What else is there that I need to talk about at the top of the show? I am reviewing Everything Sucks, a Netflix original series. And we'll be doing that on the next episode, which is Friday. So this is like the last warning that y'all have before I post my review of it. It's been out for years, so if you haven't seen it, it's a good chance that you just don't care. Yeah, so I'll be posting my review of Everything Sucks on Friday. I've already started rewatching it and taking my notes and things, and already have new things that have, like, you know, when you watch things to discuss them, you watch them differently than you do just when you're enjoying it or when it's for entertainment purposes. So there's already different things that I missed the first, and I rewatched that a few times. So things that I missed the probably second, third, and fourth time that I rewatched that show, that I'm just now getting. So we'll see if I have anything meaningful to say on Friday. But yeah, so today I wanted to discuss Kehlani evidently just did an interview with Morning Hustle, which I'm not up on all of the various shows. I don't listen to the radio, and I do listen to podcasts, but I don't listen to like celebrity interview podcasts. It's not that I don't care about celebrities and their lives and things how can I explain it? I am just painfully unaware most of the time of what's going on in people's lives, and don't have a strong interest in trying to figure that kind of stuff out. So celebrity interviews, I typically don't watch them. Like there's celebrities that I will love down, and I will never watch a single interview that they do. I'm not big into celebrity interviews. That being said, I heard that there was some controversy around Kehlani. I have to start off by mentioning that I am heavily biased in favor of Kehlani because I love Kehlani. So, you know what I'm saying? We already off to a bad start if you come in for Kehlani. It's all that. That's all I'm going to say. So evidently there's a show called Morning Hustle. It is hosted by a dude named Headcrack and a woman named L'Oreal. And I don't know. So people, I guess well, how I came across it was through the response the day after it was posted. Um, the two hosts of the Morning Hustle hopped on the mic, and I guess they were clapping back at something that Kehlani said in an IG, like two IG story posts, about how bad this interview was and why they would ever post it or whatever. And so this is more of like a rabbit hole for me after the fact. I think that's how it is for a lot of people. Um, I watched the clapback video, and then I read the IG posts, and then I went back and watched the original interview. So, um, the interview is not very long. It's only 15 minutes and 57 seconds. And the biggest complaint that these two hosts had was that Kehlani was kind of standoffish and cold. She only gave like, oh, let me take a moment here. A huge part of the backlash is about pronouns, or the believed backlash is about pronouns, about whether or not Kehlani uses she, her pronouns or they, them pronouns. She said in multiple interviews at this point that she uses both of them, and that she's not really all that pressed about it. I identify heavily with that. I go by she, her pronouns, but I'm also not all that pressed about it. I like they, them pronouns as well. So I can identify with that. So moving forward, I will be using she, her pronouns, but I am very well aware of the fact that Kehlani also goes by they, them pronouns. And that she's not that pressed about it, so I don't think y'all have to be as pressed about it either. But that she was being standoffish in this interview, that she was only giving one word answers, that I don't know, that she kind of had an attitude or something like that. And so when I went and rewatched the interview, she was a little bit standoffish, she was a little cold, those kinds of things. But this is the thing. Like I said at the beginning, I'm heavily biased, heavily biased in favor of Kehlani. So if she's standoffish, then there's got to be a reason for it, right? If she's giving you one word answers, then there's got to be a reason for it. Now, I don't know. There's a lot of speculation as to whether or not it has to do with them supposedly misgendering her, or using the wrong pronouns at the beginning of the interview. I don't think it's about using the wrong pronouns. And I think that leads into a bigger point about how in the future people need to approach those who have different pronouns than the standard she, her, or he, him pronouns. If you're going to be an interviewer, you're going to have to start to get used to dealing with things differently. It's just the reality of the situation. I don't think that it was necessarily misgendering or using the wrong pronouns. I think Kehlani had a problem probably with tone, is what it seemed like to me. That it was less of a respectful use of her pronouns and more of a mocking kind of, like she mentions mocking, kind of a mocking kind of a tone, which it wasn't overt. It was a lot of subtext. So if you're having trouble with this, it's probably because you're missing the subtext. To me, it felt like they were. There's a difference between being invested in understanding how and why a person came to the conclusion that they might use they, them pronouns, and just simply checking off boxes, which you can argue whether or not if they need to be that invested in it. I would argue if you're going to go through the trouble of interviewing celebrities, then maybe you should be. But it seemed to me like they were just kind of like checking off boxes. Like they were using they, them pronouns intermittently throughout the interview, just kind of like to check off boxes. But let's see. How do I want to lay this out? So, well, let me just say, so the intro to this interview, the male host, his name is Head Crack, said they are here and they is she and she is with us. She go by the name of Kehlani. So I don't know. Like, at first I thought that the outrage was about this person trying to use they them pronouns and then just diverting to she her pronouns. Like, I thought that that was the initial outrage. Like, she doesn't go by she her pronouns. She does go by she her pronouns. Kehlani doesn't go by she her pronouns. Why are you misgendering her? I thought that that was the initial outrage. I think that it's more, like I said, kind of the tone. So I think it's they are here and they is she and she is with us. I don't know. Maybe that left a poor taste in Kehlani's mouth. That's her business. But moving on into the interview. So she, like, from the jump, from beginning, started off with her arms crossed, kind of not wanting to answer questions, those kinds of things. They asked her a few questions. And so what I'm gonna do is, because she mentioned in her IG post, Kehlani mentioned in her IG post that this interview was different. She's never liked this in interviews. If you go and look at her other interviews, which she is on a press run right now, so there's plenty of them to choose from. If you go and look at some of her other interviews, you get a good vibe for what it's like to interview Kehlani. You get a good vibe for how she performs in interviews. And so that's what I did. I went and watched her interview that she had several days prior with Big Boy. And I'm going to try and compare the two, because I think that there's a valid point there of, like, I think that you should be aware of, okay, so how does this person interview? What kind of questions should you ask? I think that this is a really great example of the difference between somebody hopping on a mic and somebody actually being really, really good at interviewing, which is a skill. And I wholeheartedly know, like, just because somebody hops in front of a mic does not mean that they have that skill. I will tell you right now, in front of this mic, I don't have that skill. I'm not good at talking to people. You have to be really, really good at talking to people to be a good interviewer. Sure, you can get an interview, and sure, you can talk to people. You know what I'm saying? Good for you to be able to get the interview in the first place, because what? But just because you have a platform and just because you have a microphone doesn't necessarily mean that you're great at interviewing. And there are some people out there that are amazing at interview. Like, it's like breathing for them. It's like effortless. I don't know how they come across that skill, but you should not take that skill for granted. I would argue, I think that Big Boy is one of those people. I love Big Boy. Again, another bias. I really love Big Boy, so maybe there's a bias there. Another person that I always think of that's really, really great with interviews is Keke Palmer. She's done, like, the Met Gala and she's been on, like, daytime talk shows and things, and hosted. And so I think that she's really, really good at it. It's just, I don't know. That's an inherent, innate skill that they have. I do not have that skill. You will never see me, like, I will fight to the death to have to interview people because I don't have that skill. But anyway, so let's get into the Morning Hustle interview. I had never heard of their show before, so maybe this is a good thing. So they asked her, some of the things that they asked her were like, the strangest thing anyone has asked you for, like, I guess, like, money or gifts or something like that. Kehlani responded with, like, somebody wanted an insanely high signing bonus for, like, a label, of, like, a valuation of, like, $1 million or something like that, which is insane. They discussed her experiences with, like, going to therapy, kind of really trying to get these answers out of her. So she's got this new album out, which is why I should have started there. She's on this press run because she just released her album Blue Water Road, and this album, I went and listened to it. Not surprised. I like it, obviously, because it's Kehlani. And I don't know, it's just a much more like, I don't want to say a much more mature vibe, because I would argue that Kehlani, this, not just with this album, but for the past couple of albums, has been kind of on a growth arc, kind of. I would argue that the last few albums have been growth albums for her. So I don't want to necessarily say that this is insanely more mature than any other album. It's just a different vibe to me. When I listen to it, I got the vibe that you can tell and you can feel when you listen to this album that, like, she mentions that she spent a lot of time in water and that she's been around water. You get the vibe that she's, I don't know, this album sounds like somebody who's been chilling in the water for a lot of time, for a really, really long period of time. That's what it sounds like to me. I think that's the best way that I know that that's not a great way of describing. That's probably not a great way of describing it. Please go and find somebody who's actually like a music or album reviewer to go over this. I would suggest Pablo. I love Pablo. But yeah, I think that that's the best way that I can encompass what I felt listening to said album. You can tell that she's gotten very much more like spiritual. And that she spent a lot of time in water. That's what it sounds like. That's what it feels like to me. So she's promoting this album. They're asking her questions about like, so they asked her about her experience with therapy. She says that she goes once a week. They compared it to like Chris Rock, I guess, who goes like multiple times a week or whatever. They asked her 3 things you wish you never did. She mentions like shaving her head when she was like 12 or something like that. And then they get into, they ask her what her type is in dating. So like, Kehlani has been pretty open about being, for the longest, she identified as bisexual. Um, and then here recently, I think a couple of months ago, she came out as just being a lesbian, along with identifying as non-binary. And so uh, I don't know why this is the way that they decided to like approach any of that, but they started with like, "What's your type?" which I would argue is a very shallow question. There, you can tell that Kehlani's been doing a lot of introspection um, over the past few years. Like even this album, she mentioned she recorded it in 2020 and is just now releasing it. So a lot of contemplation over the past few years, I guess. I think that it's got to be an insult as an artist to be doing all of that contemplation and then to just go on like a press run and have people hit you with really, really shallow questions. Like it's already bad enough that you have to answer the exact same questions over and over and over and over and over again for, I don't even know how many different radio hosts and podcasts and magazines and all that other kind of stuff. But like for people to be not even trying to be, you know, thought provoking, I guess, or deep or anything with their questioning. I don't know. So what's your type? Kehlani, of course, says, I don't have a type. You know what I'm saying? And they start to insinuate that she would be cute with, or people have paired her with SZA, which I guess. I've seen the picture. It's not even really her, right? Like I know that there are pictures of her with SZA, but there's like this other picture that's not even her with a woman that's not even SZA, and they keep acting like it is Kehlani and SZA. So it's like a lot of unsubstantiated stuff. Anyway, so then they move on to insinuating. Well, first, let me stop there. So they insinuate that there's a relationship between her and SZA, and then they ask. L'Oreal asks the question, so no scissoring with SZA, and that's appropriate for whatever reason. Which, and then they ask whether or not she has a relationship with Megan Thee Stallion. Now, Megan Thee Stallion is very, very famously in a relationship with Party, so Not to say that they're not in an open relationship. I don't know what their deal is, but she's in a relationship. They minding their business. So I don't know why you're bringing up random female celebrities to pair with Kehlani. I think that considering Kehlani's dating history and how the press has acted around all of that, maybe just give her some slack, right? Like, give her some space on that. Because the last few, like, dudes that she's dated have all been toxic and harmful in their own ways. And I don't know. Clearly, she's not there to talk about that. Like, I feel like one of the reasonings that L'Oreal used for even bringing this up is that she mentions throughout her album, she mentions a lot of, she discusses sex, obviously. So I guess that brings up the question of whether or not that is an invitation to start having conversations about who you're having sex with. And I feel like there's a lot of interviewers out there, because they're messy, to see that as, yes, that is an invitation to ask the question, have the question answered of who you're having sex with. I think that that's overstepping, and I think that you need to gauge the tone. Now, if this was an album where whoever she's dating or sleeping with or whatever was heavily featured, then maybe you could have a conversation about that. But Kehlani, I don't think names anybody at all throughout the album. She just talks about the feelings that whoever she's been dating, or who the people that she's been dating, how they've made her feel. I don't know. Like, I think that part of being a good interviewer is having a good understanding of, like, getting a good vibe off of, or feeling the vibe of the person that you are interviewing, right? So what may fly for, like, trying to think of a good example of somebody. Like, Kehlani is not the type of person, in my mind. She doesn't give me the vibes of somebody who you would come at this way, and yet people do. I'm trying to think of, like, a good example. I mean, maybe even just the difference between Megan Thee Stallion and Kehlani. I feel like they have very different vibes. I don't know. I feel like sex is such a touchy subject. You got to be careful with the way that you approach people in general, but I think women particularly, about how you ask them questions. I think that you've come at Megan Thee Stallion crazy in interviews too. Like, people have come at Megan Thee Stallion crazy in interviews too, because they feel as though, because of the content of her music, that they can talk to her in any kind of crazy way. So when it comes to a person like Kehlani, I have to imagine that she's gone through the exact same thing, even though I would argue these are two very different artists, right? And always have been. Like, it's not like Kehlani has had this growth arc and is now a different person, and she used to be, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. They're just two very different artists, but because they have been perceived as being the same in terms of, like, gender presentation, they have all these really off the wall, out of pocket questions lodged against them, which I sat there for, like, I really needed to stop on that piece, but they kept going. So they decided to ask Kehlani about standing up for the victims of Kaylan Walker. Now, I didn't see he was one of the actors in the movie Superfly. I didn't see Superfly. I saw the silk press, or the attempted silk press, in the posters and in the trailers, and I was like, I'm not gonna go see that. So I didn't see that movie, but I did hear that there was some scandal around one of the actors in the movie. I guess it was Kaylan Walker. I didn't know. I also didn't catch Kehlani speaking publicly about the situation or any of the victims of what happened there. I do recall Kehlani speaking up on other instances of sexual assault or sexual abuse. So it doesn't sound outside of Kehlani's character. Moving on. They ask her about touring and where is her favorite place to travel. Still kind of being a little bit cold and standoffish. She says, I don't know. I haven't been everywhere in the world that I want to go yet. Then they get to asking her about like changing pronouns in her music. And they use that as a segue into asking her about her own pronouns. So Kehlani, I believe, has been talking about women in her music before for years at this point. It's not new that she's mentioning women in her music. So I don't know that that's necessarily like she garnered her following or her platform or her fan base frequently mentioning women in her songs. So that's not new. It's not a change really. And that's kind of like what Kehlani's response was like, I've not noticed any change in my fan base, which I don't know why she would, because like I said, she's been mentioning women in her music this entire time. And so then they get to asking Kehlani about her own pronouns. And the question was, you also have come out and let it be clear that your pronouns are she, her, she, they, them. Now some people, including myself, I'm gonna be honest, sometimes where ignorance is a fact of what it means exactly, what it exactly means for the they and them, because some people look at they and them as plural or whatever the case. Can you just can you just kind of give like a little brief breakdown of like why you prefer to be called what you prefer to be called, and if you feel disrespected if people don't refer to you in that manner? And Kehlani's response was, I feel like if you don't understand it, just say that. Like, don't make a mockery of it. Don't like make a joke. I think that's really stupid, and that's it. So I think that maybe that was a little bit pointed at them. It felt like that was a little bit pointed at them. Now I don't know what the conversation was prior to them actually starting, but it feels like there's maybe some stuff that we're missing from before the camera started rolling. Then after that, L'Oreal said, what was the choice for they, them? They and them. And Kehlani, in a very short answer, just said, it's just how I feel. They asked, where is your happy place? They asked Kehlani, let's see. They asked Kehlani about a post that she put up immediately after releasing the album, discussing how she felt overwhelmed with emotions and wanted to cry. They asked her why. They asked her, is she dating anybody? They asked her about her tattoos. And the interview was very short, right? So it ended 15 minutes and 57 seconds. And like immediately after the interview was done, cameras didn't even get a chance to like cut off yet. Kehlani's like out of the chair and gone. So she really did not like that interview. Didn't like those interviewers. And that was, that was released on May 7th. The next day, I believe, is when Kehlani posted her IG story responses. So, hold on a second. In these IG story notes, it says, I have kept calm, collected, mature in the face of blatant disrespect when I could have went off. I finished interviews strong with being poked and prodded at. I joyfully met thousands and thousands of fans this week, joyfully did many interviews, very much available on YouTube. If you know me, you know I'm high, bright energy until with. Stretching this situation out for clout when it's evident I was energetically responding to what was being thrown at me, and still at it was quiet. Short and protective of my energy. Y'all need this though. I get it. And then the second one says, gotta let thirsty people who have to be thirsty for a living be thirsty for their living. God bless you. Don't play with me. um, yeah, man. So immediately I was like, I don't know, like I said, I don't follow celebrity. Like I will love a celebrity down. Like I love Kehlani down. I've been listening to Kehlani's music. I don't even know how long. It's probably since 2014, 15 maybe. Um but I don't listen to interviews. I don't seek out artist interviews. I will love an artist down, but I will not seek out their interviews. And so I don't know anything about Kehlani's interview style. But for the purposes of being accurate within this show, I was like, well, let me go and look at another interview that she's done. Now, I love Big Boy, like I said. So I went and looked at Big Boy's interview with her. She also did one with Sway, I believe. Wait, hold on. So I want to go through, before I get into the other interview with Big Boy, let's get into the response that Morning Hustle had after Kehlani mentioned all this in her IG post. So they came in and they had the short, like 8-minute video. And they said that Kehlani came in an hour and a half early. She walked in and didn't speak to anyone in the room. And it said, quote, we're familiar with the fact that she goes by specific pronouns. We know this because we watched Sway's interview. And so they play the clip from Sway from Sway's show, where Kehlani says, yeah, I go by she, her pronouns, and I go by they, them pronouns. Then they say, I wanted them to feel comfortable and meet them where they're at. That's what, so L'Oreal was the one who started off speaking. Hey Crack is the one who comes in and says, I wanted them to feel comfortable and meet them where they're at. And then they play the intro again where he's saying, he says, they are here and they is she and she is with us. She go by the name of Kehlani. They replay that intro. Then L'Oreal goes off and says, now according to the team, that was supposed to be you, quote unquote, mocking her, saying exactly what she's saying, what she wants to be referred to as. Now here on the Morning Hustle show, anybody that knows me knows that I am an avid supporter of the LGBTQIA community. Like, don't ever try to spin that and make it seem like we play around or mock around with things like that. Now it's something different if you don't understand. We asked her about this in the interview. In the interview, she continued on, and this was her response every time. And then they play a few of her like one-word answers. And then they say, in hindsight, they should have probably ended the interview. And they said they blamed this on a lack of respect for quote unquote urban media. They said, this is not a small platform, sis. Now, let me keep going. Then they say, please go get media training. And then they end with, good luck with your album. I heard it only sold 21,000 copies. Maybe that's why you're doing all of this. And then they say, L'Oreal says as an aside, or 5,000 physical copies. But why don't you help her out? Play a joint for her, because that's all she wanted at the end of the day anyway. Now, as I mentioned multiple times, I'm a Kehlani, like I love Kehlani. She's not done anything in my mind yet. I've not seen anything that she's done yet that has put a poor taste in my mouth at all. So I don't know where all this energy is coming from. It says that Kehlani came in an hour and a half early. So to me, that says that there was a lot of time for them to say a lot of things off air that maybe Kehlani, even if she just overheard them saying something. Even if it was, because they said that they were in the middle of another interview, even if it was that she didn't like the way that they were interviewing somebody else, there's a good chance that, you know what I'm saying, all of the stuff that, you know, put a poor taste in her mouth, happened then. I don't know. It says that she walked in and didn't speak to anyone in the room. So I'm assuming that that's what happened, that maybe she overheard something, or maybe they said something off air that rubbed her the wrong way. But here's the thing. is that technically they did not misgender Kehlani, right? And I think that that's their larger, that's what their point is, or that's what their argument is. Like, we didn't misgender Kehlani. Kehlani said that she goes by she, her pronouns, they, them pronouns, and they use them interchangeably. But I think it's, again, like a tone thing. Are you throwing her a bone by saying they, them pronouns? Or are you, you know what I'm saying? Or are you um, trying to be respectful? And I think that even if it was their intent to be respectful, that a lot of people feel as though it came off as, uh, how can I don't know, being facetious, being, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people got that mocky kind of a tone. Which is odd, because I think that the odd thing about it to me is that um Kehlani has mentioned, clearly they've had the opportunity to watch other people's interviews with Kehlani. So they know that she goes by she, her pronouns and they, them pronouns. But that she's not pressed about which ones you use. It seems like it would have been, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's difficult to explain because it's like it's subtext within a conversation. It's not the actual conversation itself. And I think that that's maybe where the argument lies, and why a lot of people are trying to invalidate this, is saying like the words are technically correct, right? Like, we're using the right words, and that's what y'all keep getting mad at us about with these words. Like, we're using the right words to refer to Kehlani. So what are y'all mad about? I think that with Kehlani, and what Kehlani is saying is why, like, and I don't, actually, I don't even know that that's what she's upset about per se. I think that that's what we think she's upset. It could be something else. I don't know. But if that is why she's upset, I'd imagine that it's more a subtext thing. Like, if you're gonna use they, them pronouns, use them purposefully and use them without, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's like, if you're gonna have somebody who's non-binary on your show, take the time to figure out what the non-binary experience is, why this is a distinction that you are made aware of, have to be aware of nowadays. I think that this is so ironic, because L'Oreal says that Kehlani needs to go and get media training. And I would argue that this is training that a lot of people are going to have to go through at this point. Like, anybody who is interested, in anybody who does interviews for a living, anybody who interviews people on radio, for magazines, for anything, any kind of interviews, people who do that like on a day-to-day basis, this is the kind of, you have to go through that kind of training. So it's ironic that she's like, Kehlani needs to go through this training, because it's like, seem like you seem like you need to go through some training, ma'am. Cause like, my thing is like, when celebrities do these press runs, they go and talk to people and answer the exact same questions over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it's not even like y'all were the first interview that she's had even about this album. Like, y'all are well into her press run. So if anybody, I would argue through the experience of being the celebrity and not the interviewer, there's a ton of experience that Kehlani has, just because she's the interviewee, right? She has to do 5-6 different interviews a day about the exact same thing for, I don't even know how long, for weeks. You do one Kehlani interview and then you're off to the next thing. So I don't know, media experience, training, that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't know. It just felt deeply disrespectful to me. I don't know. I don't know what specific. I would need to hear from Kehlani what specifically what specifically upset her in this interview. And I don't know that she's ever gonna like say that, because she seems like she's kind of, you know what I'm saying, she said what she said, she's moving on. Um but yeah, I think that this was an example of, like, anybody can get in front of a mic, right? Anyone. Anyone can get in front of a mic. You buy a mic. I got this mic off of bnh.com. And now I have a mic. And now I post things online. So, I mean, anybody can be in front of a mic, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're great at interviewing. And anybody can ask questions, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at interviewing. And not only that, but like, you can have great questions, but if you don't have great people skills, like if you're not, that's something that I wholeheartedly admit that I am terrible at. Like, I do not have great people skills. I am not a great interviewer. Even if I had the greatest questions in the world, I would not have the tone to get the right vibe off of people as they answer these questions. And I think that that's the lesson here. Is like, you can be technically proficient, right, in your craft. You can say like, I went through the trouble of listening to other interviews by Kehlani, other interviews of Kehlani, and what pronouns Kehlani goes by, and those kinds of things. And technically you could be correct, but there's still this like X factor situation within interviewing. It's a skill, it's a talent that a lot of people don't have. Like, there are far more people who have the profession of interviewing people than actually have this skill. Now, moving into Big Boy's interview, which premiered days earlier, which I will say, moving throughout their questions, it seems like a lot of the questions that they pulled for the Morning Hustle interview, they pulled from some of these other interviews. But let's just the first thing that stood out to me, because I was like, I'm gonna go through this with a fine tooth comb. The first thing that stood out to me is the greeting, right? Like, so how do you greet your guest? I feel like can set the tone for an interview, right? So just to jog your memory, the way that the Morning Hustle started was, they are here and they is she, and she is with us. She go by the name of Kehlani. The way that Big Boy started his show, he said, Kehlani is back in the neighborhood for a big interview. How you doing, Queen? You've been holding up. That's how he started off the interview. One thing that I will say is that it's readily apparent that Big Boy has a much longer relationship with Kehlani than the hosts of the Morning Hustle, which is to be expected. I mean, Big Boy is a bigger name. But immediately is just familiarity, right? Immediately, I think that it sounds crazy, but even just starting off an interview with just asking, how are you doing, I feel is a big deal that a lot of people overlook. I don't recall if they explicitly asked Kehlani in the Morning Hustle show whether or not, or how she was doing. So take that into consideration. Some of the questions that were asked, that Big Boy asked, let's see. Are you ready to get back out there? So, and then they discussed 2020, and they evidently did an interview. One of the previous interviews was over Zoom because of the pandemic. So immediately starting off with saying like, okay, we've had this pandemic. Last time that we had a conversation, it was over Zoom. We couldn't even be in the same room. You've not released music really since the pandemic started, and maybe you got to get your legs, you know what I'm saying, get your legs again. Are you ready to get back out there? How are you feeling? What is your response to 2020? Like, I already feel like that's more thoughtful than the previous interview that I was just talking about. I mean, technically this interview came out first, but I'm going to refer to the Morning Hustle as the previous interview. They move from there and they start talking about festivals, because evidently Kehlani is doing festival. She's in a festival run right now. And then it goes to like, do you like to travel? Which I thought was interesting, because they asked the same question, right? The exact same question. Do you like to travel? Where do you like to go? Because Big Boy asked it as like, well, it seems like you're going to all these great places. Like, do you get to pick where you get to go? Because these places sound like dope, right? Same question on the Morning Hustle. Like, do you like to travel? What are some of your favorite places to go? And I don't know if it's the familiarity with Big Boy or if it's the progression of questions, because it felt more conversational with Big Boy to me. Kehlani answered like, I don't get to pick all these places, but I love that I get to go to these places. And she said any place with like a really strong culture or something like that are great. You know what I'm saying? I think she said really, really culturally specific places or something along those lines. Then they get into her allergies, and evidently I didn't even know that she had allergies. So Big Boy poses this question like, what's your food situation, because you can't actually really eat all that much. So that already is saying prior knowledge, right? So evidently not only is it that they've had multiple conversations before, but Big Boy is retaining information about these prior, I mean, basic conversational stuff, right? Like, this is how you interact with a human being. But asks her about like your allergies. Like, evidently she has allergies. I didn't know that she had allergies. And her difficulties eating evidently American food, because she responds like, I think it's only in America that I have these issues because I go and eat beef in other countries and I don't have these same problems. So they start talking about the beef industry and those kinds of things, kind of getting off topic. But then they get back on topic, and it's asked why the name Blue Water Road. What does it mean? Kehlani responds and says that this is like the studio where she recorded. It's in Malibu, or the name of the street that the studio's on, or something along those lines. Right on the water, you can see the Pacific Ocean. Let's see. Then they go. Then Big Boy asks, "Do you approach music differently now?" And so Kehlani goes into like, "Well, I'm going through this spiritual growth process." I guess she has. I don't know if it's recent necessarily, and this is the first time I've heard of it. But I also, like I said, I don't watch interviews. But it says she mentions that she has since joined a religion called Le Regla de Ocha. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Which is an Afro-Cuban religion that she describes as being a combination between Yoruba and Catholicism. And then Big Boy asks how she found that. And evidently there are a lot of people who, she thought that she couldn't join that religion because it was culturally or ethnically specific, I guess, but that she found that the religion was much more welcome and open and welcoming than she initially thought, and so has since taken up this religion. Then Big Boy asks another question and says, did this cause you to disconnect from some people? Has this changed your connection with people? Asks, was change hard for her? Then asks, do people around you support the changes that you've made? All of these are really great questions. All of them she responds to positively, with really thought out answers, and says like, yeah, like change has been different, but a lot of people say that it's a change for the better. Like they say that I hold conversations better, I make better eye contact, those kinds of things. Let's see. Big Boy asks, does music feel different now? Did you question music or the music business? And then they get into this conversation about how this album was filled with music that she wanted to make, and how sometimes she, on previous albums, like for the most part, was making music that she wanted to make, but there were some times where executives would come in and kind of force her to make certain songs, and she would have to lie and act like she was enthusiastic about these songs, even though she wasn't. I mean, really good questions. And it felt more like, I think that another thing that should be taken into consideration is that on the Morning Hustle show, that they had a printout of the questions that they were asking. On Big Boy's show, it was literally just a stream of thought, like just follow-up questions. Big Boy just had questions and was just asking them, right? Like, okay, so you said this, let me respond to what you've said with this question. Again, a skill set that a lot of people take for granted. Being a people person, I wholeheartedly understand that I am just not that, but I admire that as a skill set, because man, being able to make this sound organic, like an organic conversation, which it was an organic conversation. is a skill. Anyway, so let's see. Then they started getting into because Kehlani's on tour, but now she has a child, right? So I think that she said that she hasn't been on a solo tour since 2017. And so now she's got a child. Her daughter, Adea, is 3 years old now. And so Big Boy asked, like, how's motherhood been and what is it going to be like taking your daughter on tour? Which I think is huge in comparison to this other interview, because I don't recall them mentioning her daughter at all. Like, at all. I don't think they asked a single, and maybe it was edited out. There's a good chance that it was edited out. I don't know. They did not ask her a question about her daughter at all. They didn't. Kehlani spends pretty much all of her time with Adea. I mean, if you follow her social media, I don't follow her social media. I just see what people post on Twitter. But even then, all that I see is Kehlani with Adea. So how motherhood was never a question, was not one of the questions, I don't know. And not only that, but then Big Boy, in asking Kehlani about how motherhood has been and how she feels about it, obviously she adores her daughter Adea. We all know that. Kehlani mentions that she has like a recording on her phone of a conversation that she had with Adea, where she's just like a stream of consciousness kind of conversation where she's saying like, I love the universe, and if you could have a castle, what kind of castle would you want? You can have any kind of castle that you want, and all these really deep questions that this little baby has. And Big Boy says, you know what? I need to have a conversation with Adea. So not only has Big Boy brought up motherhood, which is a huge part of Kehlani's life at this point, but goes even further and says, like, I like the way that your child speaks. I think that we need to interview her. Then asks, will Adea go on the tour? Kehlani says, of course she can't be without her mother. She's too young, those kinds of things. And then they start talking about their shared experience with having children and how that's changed. Because Kehlani said, like, in previous tours, obviously she was, I guess kind of the rock star lifestyle of like drinking a whole lot, staying up real late and those kinds of things, and how that's going to have to be different. And she was talking about like setting up playrooms and maybe having somebody stay with Adea at the hotel while she's performing, those kinds of things. And then they get into surfing. So evidently Kehlani is really into surfing. Big Boy brought up this question of Kehlani surfing. I didn't know that Kehlani surfs. I don't research things, so it's not surprising that I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people don't know that Kehlani surfs. Where did Big Boy get this information? He very clearly did a ton of research before, or just cares, right? Just cares about Kehlani as a person. And thus had this question out of nowhere. It's not like Kehlani was like, I'm dying to talk about surfing. He just knew that she surfs and decided to ask about it. So evidently Kehlani's been surfing pretty much nonstop for the past couple weeks, and mentions dislocating her shoulder, and how her father left her like a boogie board and wetsuit, and she's been looking at it her entire life. And finally her friend, I think Natasha, got her into surfing. So, and her experience being out on the water, and so she said she loves it more than singing, which is insane. Which, as an aside, I just want to say, always keep an eye on keep an eye on people who enjoy spending a ton of time in water. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand people who just like chilling in water like all the time. I know there's a lot of people who are like that, but I don't know. I don't have that sensation to just be chilling in water all the time. But that's the vibe that I got from Kehlani, obviously, because she's surfing all the time. But also, it comes through in the album too. She spent a lot of time in water. And then she goes on to talk about Justin Bieber and doing a song with Justin Bieber, being friends with Justin Bieber. They bring up Justin Bieber's documentary, and then that's a segue into Kehlani's documentary, which she's currently filming. Now, that's another point of comparison here, is that they asked about the documentary in this interview with Big Boy. And Kehlani happily explained her point of view or reasoning behind doing a documentary series, and that she's currently filming and those kinds of things. With this other show, with the Morning Hustle show, when they mentioned, the only time that they mentioned Kehlani's documentary was in a derogatory way in response to her IG post saying, take a look at, she's got her documentary film crew. They were filming the instant that she came in the door. Take a look at the footage and show us where we're being disrespectful to her. That was their response to Kehlani. Like, never ask the question as to why. Why are you filming your life right now? Why are you doing a documentary right now? What is it about? What is it going to be called? Those kinds of things. No questions about why she's doing a documentary. Big Boy asks, why are you doing a documentary? I mean, I feel like that's a fairly easy question. But as somebody who doesn't interview people, maybe it's easy for that to slip your mind. And thus that even further points to expertise within the skill of interviewing. But they broke the interview into 2 different videos. So that was the first video. And it should be noted that video is 25 minutes and 45 seconds. So already the interview is much longer, right? In the second interview, the first question is, looking back, did you ever think you could be this happy? That's what they asked Kehlani. And she goes into, most of this interview is talking about like getting rid of literally physically toxic things. So they, well, I think, let me back up. So they go from asking her if she ever thought that she could be this happy. And her response was something along the lines of, I didn't think that I could ever get out of my own way. That was her response. Then, so we've had all of this time, you know what I'm saying? They've asked her all of these questions. Now, I don't know, because it's broken into 2 different sections and it could be heavily edited. I don't know. But it's not until this second part that they start discussing pronouns. In the second part, they say, they ask her, like, so what's up with your pronouns? Like, I don't want to be disrespectful or anything like that. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience with, that kind of thing? And Kehlani says, it's not that deep to me. I'm so fluid consistently that sometimes I identify heavier on one side than the other. Sometimes certain things sound better to me in the moment, and certain things sound better to me otherwise. I think that I'm ever changing in that way. I'm always changing. Certain energies are more present than others at certain times for me, and I just don't put that same pressure on myself. And then Kehlani mentions that she changed the pronouns on her, I think, IG page or Twitter page or something like that. Kind of just quietly, you know what I'm saying, to herself, just like affirming her own gender experience. And then it wasn't until like 5 or 6 months after she had done that anybody even really noticed and decided to make that into a story. So it wasn't even that she was like attention seeking or anything like that with this. And then she says, I just feel like I'm just a person. There are very much parts of the idealized and the societal made version of womanhood that I do really appreciate and identify with, which is why I haven't completely ridden myself of the she pronoun. I feel like I'm just a person. Like I feel like I'm really vast, and it doesn't necessarily always get encompassed in the conversation of womanhood, if that makes any sense. And Big Boy says, yes, of course that makes sense. Excuse me. And Big Boy says, yes, of course that makes sense. Then Kehlani goes on to say, I feel like people have always done this thing with me where it's like womanhood is this and womanhood is that, and how does it feel to be that they don't do to men, or that I just feel like that conversation gets eliminated when we're just talking about who I am as a person, which I think is a great way of explaining it. As somebody who is genderqueer myself, I feel like it probably sucks. Like I don't know. Kehlani kind of addressed this in the interview, saying that I feel like a lot of people overblow this situation. Like a lot of people who are mocking people who choose to have different pronouns are saying it as though people who change their pronouns are doing so to be combative and then like seek out conflict with other people. And Kehlani said within this interview with Big Boy that that's not been her experience, and that's not really been my experience either. She said that she doesn't know of anybody who is gender nonconforming or non-binary that is belligerent in the face of having the wrong pronouns used. It's just like constant correction, I guess. And yet they're painted out as being combative or aggressive or belligerent or those kinds of things, which is purely like I guess the imagination or the creation of these people who just don't want to accept the ways that society's changing now. I think that that's a great way of explaining it too. Saying that like womanhood is this thing, and oftentimes like I don't know. I can see if you are somebody who's a celebrity and you are perceived as a woman, that there's a standard that you are held to that maybe you don't necessarily care about or want to aim for, and yet simply because you are perceived as a woman, people hold you to that standard, and that it might be easier to not to have to deal with that all the time. I think that's a valid argument. And Kehlani said, deal with me. I'm a person. Deal with me like I'm a person, which I feel like a lot of, I mean, regardless of if you are cis or trans or NB or whatever, I feel like pretty much all celebrities feel that way. Like, deal with me as a person, that kind of a thing. I feel like the content of the music can sometimes overshadow who the person is that's creating it. And people just, I mean, the easy interview tactic is to go by what the lyrics are saying and then just like create an entire interview around like, well, your lyrics discuss having sex in this way, so let's discuss you having sex in this way. And it's like, okay, but what about this person like as a person? That kind of a thing. I could see that getting annoying, especially if you're on a press run like we're discussing and you're doing interview after interview after interview after interview over and over and over again. So I think that and in comparison, so I think that just shows like when you show a genuine interest in why somebody has changed the way that they identify or has does anything in terms of like gender affirmation, that kind of a thing. When you have genuine questions and are seeking to genuinely understand that person, what a different response you can get out of that, right? I think that the key here is that maybe Kehlani didn't feel that on this other show they were being genuine. And then it's the last few questions were like, do you feel like people put certain things on you? And Kehlani says like, yeah, there's a lot of people who have these perceptions of me, and it's like, I don't even know where you got that from. Like, if you spent even the slightest bit of time with me, you would know that that's not me. And I think that that's true. I think that unfortunately, Kehlani exists in a weird space where she's never masqueraded as being like a straight woman, and so I think that she's always kind of been maybe like an outlier just because she's identified in the past as bisexual. Bisexuality within the entertainment industry, I think it's painted less as, well, I think bisexuality in general is painted less as like a legitimate sexuality and is just seen as greed, and is seen as lustfulness, as I don't know, like being insatiable. I don't know. I think that that's attached to pretty much any sexuality that's not heterosexuality, I would argue. And there's not very many, like, there's a lot of, I want to have a conversation about queer baiting. There's a lot of people out there who, like, when it comes to the sexuality of women within the entertainment industry, it's almost treated like seasoning, like it's like sprinkled on everything. And even with legitimate sexualities, like two women being interested in each other romantically, sexually, whatever, it's still seen as a performance because of the way that the entertainment industry approaches that. Like women's sexuality is not legitimate. If that is just what they do, kind of a thing. As performers, you have to be sexy. That's what you do. And sometimes that kind of spills over onto other women. And that's just, that's the way that the entertainment industry approaches that. So it kind of devalues the experience of women who are bisexual or who are homosexual. There are next to no homosexual women in the music industry that have any kind of real platform. To be perfectly honest, like, I think that if you're bisexual, they'll maybe like make that a quirky thing about you and allow you to have a career. But for the most part, homosexual women they don't really have a platform. They don't really have opportunities within the music industry. And yet the music industry then turns around and takes straight women and has them making out with each other or grinding on each other or whatever in music videos and on stage performances and things like that. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like it can only be contained within the context of performance. And when it's not, when somebody who exists as part of a sexuality that's not heterosexuality or that is like legitimately bisexual, not like using it as as an asterisk, then people don't know how to act. Like, they don't know how to ask questions around that. They don't know how to respect that. And I think that Kehlani, because she came up in the time that she did, I think that she's paved a road for a lot of people to come up behind her that don't have the same gender or sexuality experience as others. But unfortunately, that means that she's got to take a lot of hits. Just because people are idiots and they're not inquisitive and because they like to be snarky and dumb and those kinds of things. Like, unfortunately, she's just living her experience and learning things about herself and those kinds of things, and happens to be somebody who's very talented with music. People don't know how to act around that. And so it's just degraded into just like the sex act, I guess. And that's where the like scissor thing came up. I don't know. Just tactless and shameful. So I can totally understand, even just on that basis alone, why she didn't like that interview and why she wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. So, let's see. They went on to ask Kehlani about like foods that she likes to cook. They asked about changes in her diet. She's got like a gluten allergy, I guess. They asked her about getting breast implants and having them removed. She talked about all of these health complications that she had as a result of having breast implants and how she feels so much better now that they're gone, and how she's reshaped her own understanding of her own beauty and those kinds of things. I don't know, just a really great, a much better interview. I'm sorry, it just is like a much better interview. So lastly, I just wanted to go through, because I like to go through people's comments, go through tweets discussing this. Sine, I think is how you say that, who is a singer. She goes by she and they pronouns. So if you want to see her stuff, another person who could be, paving roads for people. She says, see, there's an actual music journalist out there that would have lived for a chance to interview Kehlani, but instead it was you. Sorry to that journalist. Sorry to Kehlani. These two took up space they ain't have any business being in. Get a new job. Let's see. Kimberly Nicole Foster, well-known YouTuber, said, as a brand new Kehlani stan, I've watched a ton of their interviews. They're not the problem. Some black media personalities think they're going to get on by being shock jocks, and they didn't play along. Which I actually, Kimberly, if you follow Kimberly, she talks about that a lot, about people who debase themselves in order to get a following, like people who debase themselves specifically within interviewing and those kinds of things, or people who do like hot topics, but like in a messy way. Like trashy post kind of accounts and things. particularly the shade room. She has she has disdain for the shade room. She frequently talks about that. So I mean, valid. And then as a second tweet up under this, she said, Kehlani is just trying to make music, commune with their ancestors, and raise their child. Stop bothering them. Pablo said, imagine thinking you are doing Grammy nominated off a mixtape Kehlani a favor. The jokes write themselves. And lastly, Anusha, I think is how you say that, said, you know what's interesting about the person who interviewed Kehlani? I think a lot of people want to be Wendy Williams, but don't have the journalistic skills that she has. And I'm not saying she was like the quote unquote best, but people talk to her. I'm saying there's some innate skill. Like, you can't take it for granted, the ability to talk to people. Not everybody has that. Even like, I'll say that, like, Wendy Williams, I feel like there's some shady conduct, you know what I'm saying, when her show was, you know what I'm saying, when she was on her show, on her shows, because she was on radio too. But yeah, like, the ability to have people open up to you, even if they're angry, having the ability to get people to answer your questions, or coming up with, it's not just coming up with decent questions or even good questions. It's about being personable, right? That's a skill. Not a lot of people have that. A lot of people have access to microphones these days. I do. I have access to a microphone, but I will be the first to tell you that I cannot interview people. I'm sorry. So that was it. I think that this is a great, I won't say it's a masterclass, but I think that it's a great example of good interviewing versus bad interviewing, right? But I really love Kehlani's album. You should go and listen to it, Blue Water Road. It sounds like water to me. That's all that I can say about it. It sounds like being in the ocean. So yeah, if you made it this far through this interview, if you made it this far through this show, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, I really appreciate it. Leave your comments down below on how you feel about either the album or how the Morning Hustles interview went. If you like some of the other interviews that Kehlani's done, those kinds of things, I'd be happy to hear it. Yeah, and on Friday, I'm going to be reviewing Everything Sucks. So, last heads up, just letting you know. And until I see you next time, be good.